ego that reflects on the global level the same lack of depth and richness that exists in our individual lives. Throughout this tape, I have presented reasons for taming the personal ego and suggestions for how to do that. The very same can be said for doing this on a global level. I hope it is as obvious to you as it is to me that the collective ego will benefit when we transcend our individual egos. You, as a single individual, have a sacred quest. That quest involves coming to your higher spiritual nature and inviting it to show you the way of the sacred self in your daily life. This means denying the demands of your ego if those demands contradict the guidance of your higher self. Our world is a collection of individuals urged on by the loving presence within all of us to achieve the sacred quest personally and collectively. The world will become a peaceful, fulfilled, cooperative, loving, truthful, tolerant, and pure environment as the individual parts that make up the collective consciousness restrain their egos. As is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. The whole behaves precisely as does its individual parts. Many people I speak to tell me that they feel powerless to affect the global community. They believe that, given the scope of the world's problems, their efforts are so infinitesimal as to be insignificant. They simply are not seeing that it is precisely through a change in individual consciousness that the world will be transformed. All of the problems that we face as a group reflect those we have individually. The world is encountering a spiritual deficit that reflects our need to consciously get on the path of our sacred quest. The solution to individual and global problems is to overcome the spiritual deficit. When you make the shift in consciousness, allowing yourself to be an agent of heightened awareness, you are contributing to the transformation of our world. You are not separate from the other souls on this planet. You share the identical energy that embodies the souls of Rwanda and Pakistan, for example. You are the lamp, and God is the electricity. It flows through you as surely as it flows through all living things. When you make the decision to choose the guidance of your higher self over your false self, you have plugged into the divine inner energy. When you run your life based on the principles of the higher self, you are contributing to the transformation of the entire world. You must strengthen your will to choose the sacred path when your ego calls you a fool for believing there could ever be a world without war. If your ego can convince you, you will become part of the collective ego's falseness. Individuals who choose ego propaganda are individuals who will build more bombs and manufacture more weapons. Currently, there are some 6 billion people on the planet. About 3 million are at war or in skirmishes that cause them to kill and torture each other. But that means that there are 5,997,000,000 who are not at war. This is a hopeful statistic, which our egos do not want us to consider. By contrast, the collective ego strives to keep the populace nervously on the edge with reminders to view the world in terms of us versus them. This ego viewpoint not only reinforces the insane escalation of ways to kill each other, but is also responsible for most of our social problems. The world ego is our false self, and this is the primary characteristic that we need to recognize. We want to believe that we are our physical bodies and that the territories we occupy are so important that we are willing to kill each other in order to maintain those boundary lines. We have become convinced that our true identities are located in tribal ancestries, traditions, histories, genealogies, and the color and shape of our bodies. We have lost sight of our authentic identities because of the labels that our egos have assigned to us. Our egos have coalesced into a worldwide false perception of ourselves based on an unwillingness to know our true spiritual nature. Although all of our spiritual leaders have reminded us of our divinity and implored and even commanded us to love one another, the world ego has won this battle and produced ancient enmities and uncountable horrors in the long history of humanity. The spiritual solution to the major problems that face the world is to bring into positions of power those who are not motivated and driven by their egos, but see the collective good as their primary objective. We need leaders who do not manifest primitive tendencies of consciousness such as hate, envy, greed, bloodthirstiness, and intolerance, but are grounded in love, tolerance, truth, and purity. As you travel the path of your sacred quest, you will help to dispel the absurdity of specialness that the ego so assiduously promotes. You will see an end to this kind of thinking in your life and on a worldwide scale as well. The higher part of ourselves that I have talked about on this tape reacts to a vision that is infinite. This is assuredly not the vision of the ego. The ego is just as cowardly on a collective scale as it is on an individual basis. The world ego is frightened of a mass appeal to overcome our spiritual deficit. When people face inward and embrace a more loving perspective, the power of the sacred self will create change not only in the community but in the entire world as well. The world ego will do all that it can to prevent this kind of inner approach. It will ridicule those who promote meditation, peaceful demonstrations, and the love of God as a way out of the morass of social evils. The collective ego convinces itself that money makes it special, and thus it will throw dollars at any problem and pride itself on the undertaking. Consume, consume, consume. More is better. The more you accumulate, the fancier your toys, the bigger your shopping malls, the more petrol that you use in your automobiles, the more successful you are. It is a push away from peace toward a style of consumerism and capitalism that is defended as the way of civilization. Yet your higher self knows there is no peace in the more is better. It is just as true on the collective level as it is on the individual plane. The higher self urges you to simplify and to avoid contributing to anything that hurts others or increases the separation from your spiritual source. As you listen more closely to your sacred self and transcend your ego, so too will the world ego be shifted away from power, control, and money, back to the basic virtues of higher awareness, back to peace, beauty, love, purity, tolerance, patience, and compassion. This does not mean that the benefits of technology cannot be enjoyed. It means that the ego will not be the motivating force in our lives. What we truly are as a people is a force that craves peace and simplicity. We want that deeper awareness that comes with the sanity of the higher self. It is insane to continue believing that we are a collection of tribes, each with a separate identity and a special mission. It is insane to believe that anyone who does not fit into our particular tribal mentality is a potential enemy. We know that there is not a separate God for each of us, or even for each of our tribes. We know that there is a universal divine intelligence that flows through all of us, and in that sacred space within us, we are all one and the same. We know that the best within us is love, kindness, and compassion. Yet our egos, both individually and collectively, have campaigned long and hard to promote a false idea. How sane is it for people to be killing each other over disputes that ancient egos created long before we arrived? How sane is it for us to believe that some of us deserve to eat the food that God provides, and that others do not deserve it by virtue of their geographic location? How sane is it for us to pump up our youth with the philosophy of the free ride by leading them to believe that if they want something, they deserve it? How sane is it to show our children pictures of violence as entertainment and allow them to adopt the ego belief that it is human nature to hurt others as a way to defend a right to be special and separate? As our higher selves begin to triumph over ego in the daily decision-making of our lives, we will truly be making progress on the path of the sacred quest for all of humanity. You must banish all doubt about your ability to facilitate such a quest and begin to know that you are both the microcosm and the macrocosm. There is a universe within you, a unified field of all possibilities that you can reach as you become the compassionate witness. Be silent. Shut down the inner dialogue. Most important, transcend the false self that we call the ego. That is when the healing will begin to occur. The world ego is destined to be restrained as more individuals look within and consult the higher part of themselves. The doubts are vanishing, and the spiritual revolution is well underway. Moving toward an egoless world is not some far-fetched idea, any more than the disintegration of the Iron Curtain was a far-fetched idea. To those who heard such talk a few years before it happened, it did indeed seem absurd, but ideas, thoughts, and inner knowings are powerful instruments for the disintegration of the false self. One of the simplest and most powerful ways of doing this is taught by Eknath Eswaran. Writing in his book Meditation, he advises us to spend 30 minutes every morning in meditation repeating the prayer of St. Francis. In saying this prayer, we both transcend the ego and invite the sacred self to guide us through the day. I invite you to join me in this daily prayer as we share the path of the sacred quest. The prayer of St. Francis goes like this. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. It is in dying to self that we are born to eternal life. If you have the same knowing about your world, dramatic changes will take place as we collectively put to use the greatest force in the universe, the force of love. It seems only fitting to quote my spiritual teacher, Nisargadatta Maharaj, as I close this tape. He reminds us of the simplicity of creating a society that is based on spiritual principles. He puts it this way: "My stand is clear. Produce to distribute. Feed before you eat. Give before you take. Think of others before you think of yourself. Only a selfless society based on sharing can be stable and happy. This is the only practical solution. If you do not want it, then fight. I want it. I encourage you to do the same. God bless you, and thank you for listening."
And if